Mike, thank you so much for joining me on the Captain's Vlog, which is the name that we've given this this video podcast. It's a pleasure having you here. We met a good few years ago now, and you very kindly joined the board of RocketPhone, which was Voice IQ back when we first met, and it's a great privilege to have you as our Chief Science Officer, and it's been great. It's been great so far. I'm looking forward to growing RocketPhone and with your help and the team at Oxford. So I thought it's probably worthwhile for the folks that haven't met you before, just to explain what your role is. I mean, when you joined us initially, you were head of computer science at Oxford, and I think you moved on to bigger and better things now in terms of focusing more on the research side of AI. But why don't you explain to everybody what your day-to-day activity and role is, and the part that you play in sort of creating this world that we live in, which is all full of AI now.
Yeah, so I'm Professor of Computer Science at the University of Oxford and an AI researcher, and I've been doing AI and nothing but AI since 1989. And my standard joke, and I know you've heard me make this joke before much, so apologies for that, but for most of that time it was a nice quiet existence. I didn't bother anybody and nobody bothered me. I just got on with my thing. And then things started going crazy around about 10 years ago, and they started going crazy because core AI technologies, machine learning technologies, voice recognition technologies really started to work, because the science and the data and the compute all came together for this kind of magic confluence. So this is just an extraordinarily exciting time to be an AI researcher. So I was head of department here at Oxford going into the pandemic, so I feel like I did my bit in the trenches there, taking the department through the pandemic. And I'm now focusing on the possibilities of contemporary AI research. Where is AI going? The kind of opportunities it raises, and it's a wonderful time to be an AI researcher. It's the most extraordinary time to be working in that field. And I also work at the Alan Turing Institute in London, the UK's National Centre for AI and Data Science. And there I'm Director of AI Research at the Alan Turing Institute. And again, there's a huge number of opportunities through the Alan Turing Institute that we're chasing up.
That's phenomenal. And I mean, you have this really amazing career, and you've been doing this for what 3 decades now. So you've literally written the book on AI, haven't you? I think. Feel free to plug your book, by the way.
Yeah, well, I've written a couple of books. I mean, the easy one is the Ladybird book on AI, which is a nice, accessible introduction to AI in the classic Ladybird format. It's not one of the jokey ones; it's a serious one.
It's a serious one,
but it's very accessible and very readable. The longer, sort of more detailed and in-depth one is the Pelican book on AI called The Road to Conscious Machines.
Yes.
And this is slightly heavier going, but aimed at a non-technical audience still. And if you want to find out really what AI is all about and how it works, and more particularly what didn't work along the way, then that's a book that you should read.
I mean, as a startup software company, I mean, I guess as each day goes by, we're less and less of a startup, and as each customer comes on board, I suppose. But I guess we're still sort of in the realms of sort of startup territory. And we're delighted that you're a part of RocketPhone. But what made you want to work with us? I mean, what drew you towards us? You could work with the NHS and all these huge organisations, right? But you're working with us. So.
Well, I can do the science. That's been my bread and butter for 30 years. But actually what excites me now, as I said earlier, is AI now works, basically. Core AI technologies work. And what's really exciting is about the possibility of seeing those put in practice and seeing them put to use, to see them to use to create innovative and exciting products that are going to help businesses and help people. So solving real world solving real world problems. And RocketPhone has made a number of advances, and I think they're very impressive advances, and so I'm very happy to be involved. And also, I have to say, Mudge, with somebody with your track record, it's just a pleasure to work with you, because I know that you're the person who can turn the science and the technology into those products. That's not what I'm good at. That's not what I'm trained at, and I know that. So the possibility of working with somebody like yourself is just a really exciting opportunity.
That's very, very kind of you to say, Michael. I really appreciate that. So in terms of, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, isn't there? There's I think the thing that's sort of grabbing everyone's attention at the moment is the ChatGPT stuff, and I've been using it, and it just feels to me like you have these hype cycles, and something comes out, and suddenly everyone's aware of it, and it gets a lot of hype, a lot of visibility in the media, and it makes its way into the sort of popular general media, and suddenly everyone knows about it. Like even my wife, who couldn't care less about AI most of the time, she came to me saying, "Have you used ChatGPT? Do you know what it is?" I mean, do I know what it is? Of course I know what it is. But as soon as my wife gets to hear about it, it's definitely out there in the popular domain. And I've been using it, and I've been finding that it can be a time saver with some things, but sometimes it feels like it's like Googling for something, and what it's doing a good job of is it's presenting that result set, in a way that is very natural and in good English, and in a way that it appears to be that it's responding in a human-like way. And I was just wondering what you thought about ChatGPT, because people are talking about this sort of generative AI stuff as like, we are now one step away from generic or general AI, as we've come to understand it.
So first, I think it's very exciting, and I think it really is a breakthrough. I mean, I think that we're seeing a step change in capability of AI. One of my colleagues who's been working in the area for a similarly long time, who's specifically in natural language, ordinary languages like English, and they said, they've had PhD students working on a whole bunch of problems for decades, and then ChatGPT solved them almost as an afterthought. So it is a big deal. And when you first use it, and I mean, if any of the listeners for this, if they haven't used it, go and play with it, and you'll see, it's wonderful. Anybody with a web browser anywhere in the world can access the world's most sophisticated AI technology and get a feel for what it's capable of. So have a play. And the first time you use it, you think, wow, this, they've cracked it. This must be the end of AI, right? This is the real deal. This is the AI we were promised. Is a lot of people's reaction to this. But then, as you use it, you don't have to dig very deep to discover its limitations. And you're using it, and you think, well, it comes back with something, and it's wrong, or it just gets very confused on some things that it just feels like it shouldn't get confused on. Some stuff that seems like really difficult, it gets right, and some stuff which should be trivial, or you think it should be trivial, it gets hopelessly wrong. And so, you then start to realize, actually, this is cool, this is genuinely interesting. And, people will find a million interesting, innovative ways to use it. But it is only a piece of the AI puzzle. And real AI, the general AI that you mentioned, they mentioned there, that's still some way off. We are still some time from having AI that has the full range of capabilities that a human being has. So it's not just a curiosity. It's not just a bit of smoke and mirrors. Absolutely isn't. There is definitely some interesting AI technology there, and I think it really represents a step change. It's not the end of the road in AI, though. And as time goes on, we're going to get a much better feel for the things it can do and the things it can't do, and that's going to help us understand where we need to go next.
I think what's quite, for me, if I think back to the origins of OpenAI, which is the organization that owns ChatGPT or created it, Elon Musk was an early investor in that company, and he sort of famously invested in that company because he was fearful about the possibility of the consequences of a general AI coming about and taking over all of mankind and humanity as we know it. But since then, I think he stepped away a bit from it, and it's turned into much more of a commercial operation with the big investments from Microsoft and everybody else. And Elon Musk recently made some comments about the fact that ChatGPT, or OpenAI, I should say, has become more of a commercial concern rather than something that was a bit more sort of homed around philanthropy, or sort of like making sure the social outcomes of the technology were beneficial to mankind. But that it gets me thinking about, if people are suitably convinced by something like ChatGPT, then there is some responsibility upon the people that created it to think about the ethics of what they're pushing out there, because when they get something convincingly wrong, then they're actually impacting a very large number of people. And this ethics thing isn't just about ChatGPT, is it? It's just that we see it with autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. And
Absolutely.
what's happening in that space?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of issues. I mean, so the way that systems like ChatGPT is only one, it's the best known, but all the big tech companies have got their own version of ChatGPT, even if they're not sort of publicly available yet. The way that they work is that they're trained by ingesting basically the entirety of the World Wide Web. And the point of that is to expose them to lots and lots and lots of very ordinary language, and that's literally how they learn language. The problem is that in all of that, there's an enormous amount of toxic content. There's every kind of bias imaginable. There's misogyny, there's racism, there's homophobia, transphobia, everything is out. Because if you spend any time on the World Wide Web, you know that stuff is there. And all of that is absorbed by these systems, and it's in some sense kind of just latent within their neural networks. And so the companies, by and large, try to avoid giving explicitly toxic content to these systems, but there's only so much that they can do because there's so much of this data. It just isn't feasible to get humans to really check in detail all the data that's fed to these. And so they can spout that stuff. And again, companies try to prevent you from leading their products into producing toxic content and so on, or biased content. But at the moment, you don't have to be very smart to figure out to figure out backdoors around that and to trick them into producing toxic content. So that, I think, is an ongoing challenge, and there's a huge number of people working on that problem.
Yeah.
There's another related problem, which is that it's very easy, if you don't understand what you're interacting with, to believe that this really is a kind of an intelligent individual that you're dealing with. It's like a sentient being. Yeah. And so there's an idea in the AI community called the Turing red flag, and it's the golden rule is you should never ever pass off an AI as a person. That is, when somebody's dealing with an AI program, they should always be aware that they're dealing with a program. You should never mislead them into believing that they're dealing with a human being. So there's a whole bunch of issues there, and actually, they're becoming understood as the technology is being used, because people start to use the technology in ways that you didn't anticipate, and then that reveals new issues that you need to start to look at and address. So it's a work in progress, I think, is the simplest way of putting it. And bias and toxic content are probably the headline ones. The other one, which is also very prominent, is that these things can come back with just falsehoods. They don't know what true or false is. They've got no conception of truth or falsity. And they can come back with very plausible and very confident statements, which are just complete nonsense. So, dealing with that. So this is called hallucinations. Dealing with that, getting the program so that they don't come back with these hallucinations, that's another big ongoing piece of work. And people, when you use GPT, by the way, the ChatGPT or GPT-3, its predecessor, you absolutely need to be aware of that. Just because this thing is telling you, that the Earth is flat, it doesn't mean that the Earth is flat.
There are plenty that would just be quite happy to go with that. I'm sure.
That's true.
So there's plenty out there.
Yeah, but of course, that's exactly another issue, right? If it's telling you something that you want to believe...
Well, exactly, yeah. It's all about confirmation bias. Yeah, it's fascinating that. So we always, as a computer science graduate myself, we learnt about Alan Turing and the Turing test, and back in the day, I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit that I was tinkering with technology back in the very early '80s. Giving away my age now, but back then we had these sort of games and things where you could chat to systems, and the whole point of these systems was to pretend or give the impression that you were chatting to a human being, and if it did, it passed the Turing test, right? And it's just fascinating that the same, I guess, Turing Institute is now trying to like sort of say, well, hang on a second, everything's passing the Turing test, with flying colours now. Now we've got to think about just, laying some ethics around this to assure people of who they're speaking to. And that takes me on to something actually that I find fascinating, which is, the interplay between research, universities, academia, and it is almost the role of academia, it seems, to make sure that the private sector aren't going off and doing crazy things, because their motivations are completely different, and they're not always driven by the needs of, the longer term and the long term needs of society.
And I think the other important thing that academia does is it comes in and tidies up. I mean, companies, they build on products and don't necessarily have the time or the inclination or the wherewithal to really, dig into the details, the mathematics, all of that, all of that kind of stuff, and to figure out, how this stuff is really working and what's going on. And, that's what academia does. Mm-hmm. But I think also, there is a very, very strong incentive in academia, a very strong feeling of sort of, to look at, the issues like ethics and so on. And so these are very, very prominent issues, bias and so on, are very prominent issues in academic studies of AI.
Are we seeing then the emergence of sort of standards organizations or boards whose responsibility it is to independently sort of assess something? Because what's quite scary actually is when individuals with huge amounts of cash can just buy something like Twitter, right, and then they become the law around what is suitable for public consumption, and there is no third party, and then they may do it under the guises of offering freedom of speech and that sort of good stuff, but really all this stuff comes under the control of a very small number of people. It's kind of out of control in some respects.
Interesting times. I think, we're kind of just over 10 years into the social media revolution, really, and we're seeing things move in ways that we aren't necessarily comfortable with. I mean, social media's had all sorts of side effects that, like disinformation and so on, which weren't, some people certainly anticipated them, but I think they weren't widely anticipated when these, when we were just sharing pictures of cats, much more innocent times. We haven't found the equilibrium yet. I think there's much more work to do to find that equilibrium and to figure out exactly what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. What are we prepared to countenance and what aren't we prepared to countenance, and what exactly are we going to hold social media companies accountable for and AI companies accountable for? What should they be responsible for when they release their products? I mean, I think the bottom line is, particularly when it comes to AI products, if you release a product, you certify that it is fit for purpose. And you have a responsibility to make sure that it is fit for purpose, and that you make sure the users of that technology understand properly understand what it can and can't do, that you warrant that this thing is going to behave in the way that you claim it is going to behave. We're not there yet, I have to say. I think with AI, there's that's not where we're currently at. There's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon and making kind of slightly wild claims, which is a bit concerning. But there will inevitably be shakeouts, but I certainly think people need to be absolutely aware of those issues.
I mean, if we look forward now, like let's think about the future of humanity as we know it. I look online and I see things that were unimaginable just less than 5 years ago. It's entirely possible to create a model that can mimic someone's voice almost identically. You can create visual models that mimic someone's appearance. You put the two together and you have an avatar that looks just like whoever, Boris Johnson, President Obama, whoever you want it to look like, saying whatever they want it to say. Vladimir Putin, whoever you want it to be, and it just feels like we're on that fringe of people talk about AI isn't. You shouldn't imagine a Terminator scenario where you have these like great big sort of machines going around shooting and so on. But you can do as much damage without the gun. And what do you like? How do you see things playing out? Are we the Wild West right now?
I'm not sure it's the Wild West, but I think certainly, we are entering a new era, and the new era is where when you see a video of Barack Obama or something declaring war on Russia, you should not necessarily believe that. And so there is, I think, a lot of my colleagues believe the following, that actually where we're going is that it's going to be very important in the future to be able to certify human content, the stuff that humans are creating versus the stuff that machines are creating. Apart from anything else, imagine in 20 years' time or 50 years or 100 years' time, there's going to be vastly more AI-produced content out there than there is human-produced content. And so we need to absolutely certify the bits that are human versus the bits that are AI-produced. And so having trusted channels, I think, is going to be very, very important. As we saw on Twitter when there were the changes around the certification that you could get, to certify that this really is that this really is Michael Wooldridge, losing that trust, I think, was potentially very damaging. So I think it is going to be extremely important in the future to be able to certify that this was Michael Wooldridge speaking, and that this is human-generated content. This is not machine-generated content. How exactly we do that is a question, and that, I think, is not resolved. But we're clearly where we're going in the immediate future is, you see a video on social media which purports to be Barack Obama declaring war on Russia. You should not necessarily believe that. No. It's fake news.
So it'd be interesting to see what comes up in the area. I guess what you're speaking about is provenance, being able to get to the root of something, like whether it's a piece of content, a piece of video, a piece of audio, what produced it, where did it come from, and tracing that back to its origins. And if we can do that, then I guess we're in an okay place. But I think from our perspective, we're going to continue developing RocketPhone. I think that the world of telesales, customer service, and marketing has nothing to fear from any sort of global domination from us, other than just getting as many companies using it as possible. Sorry?
It seems unlikely.
Yeah, and the other work that we're doing, as we all, obviously you've helped us do this, is the AI that we've built to detect vulnerability. We at RocketPhone are working on things that we can take to market that have the specific purpose of benefiting people. So the work that we all did together around detecting vulnerability, where we can detect signs of dementia, aphasia, RHD, stress, financial stress, domestic stress, and so on, during a live conversation. This sort of AI, to me, is #AI for good. So we're looking to help people in vulnerable situations, and if we can continue promoting this sort of research, then hopefully others will sort of follow suit, and the prevalence of AI for good will start to burgeon and grow, and it won't just be about profits. It'll also be about improving the lot of the people in our societies. So on that note, Michael, once again, thank you ever so much for your time. I know, where are you right now? You're in Lisbon, I think, aren't you?
I'm in Lisbon at the moment.
Yeah, you're an Oxford professor, but the amount of time you spend at Oxford versus elsewhere, I'm not quite sure how that ratio stacks up. But I think you still qualify as an Oxford professor. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It was always fascinating speaking to you and getting your thoughts and insights on what's happening in the world of AI. So thank you so much.
It's really a pleasure. Much exciting times ahead.
Indeed. Okay, take care, Michael. Thank you.